Hello, welcome to Handmade for Me. I'm Roz. Join me sewing the Frogmouth pattern, which is available from my website and my Etsy store. Let's get cracking. Let's just go through all of the pieces that we need because there are a few bits to this pattern. Starting at the outside, I have my handle, which I'm going to be folding to make into the top handle. Coming in, I have my gussets, which will go down the side of the bag. 2 gussets, 1 for each side. I have my zip for the outer with its pull. I have the pocket that will go in the middle, which is exactly the same as a pouch if you were going to make one. You have the outer and the lining. There's also the zip and the 2 zipper tabs. I've just clipped them on so that they don't get lost. I have my zips. They don't need to be this long. This just happens to be what I've got. I will be cutting it down to size. I have my 2 pockets, which will be going into my lining. Then I have my outer, which is the same shape and from the pattern piece like the lining. So these 2 are from the pattern pieces. Everything else you will have cut according to the specifications on the cutting page. Just a quick word about interfacing. As you can see from the fabric I'm using, it's a fake leather, it's a leatherette, so it's actually got a felt backing to it. It's quite soft, it looks like it's a hide, but it isn't. Because it's reasonably thick, I'm actually choosing not to interface this because it will have its own structure. The lining is a sort of canvas, so I have interfaced that, and that will help with the structure. I will interface the pockets just with a piece across the top. I'll show you that when we get to that section, but I'm just going to do it across the top because I only need it to be reinforced where I'm putting in the zips. So we're going to start with the 2 gusset pieces. Just take one of the pieces. If you want to make sure that it's pressed beforehand, fold it over, match the edges. I find it easier to do it this way round. Match the edges, make sure that it's square. Because this is a canvas, I just need to give it a bit of a savage pinch along there to keep that fold. And then I can clip it. When I stitch it, I'm going to stitch along here and up to and close the short sides and leave an opening on the bottom. Okay, I've just stitched this one in a pink thread because that's going to be easier for you to see than white. What we're going to do now is just clip these corners so that we take a triangle off there. And snip a little at the top as well. Obviously missing the stitches. There's a bit of thread I missed. I missed that as well. And then all I do is I'm going to turn this out. If I can get my fingernails in there. There we go. And then I'm just going to close that seam. Now I'm only using quilting clips because it's easier for me to reach them. If you want to put pins on, that's fine. So there you have one of the gussets done. I have, with about a 1/2 centimetre gap, seam allowance, I have stitched and caught the hole at the bottom and made 1 gusset. I'll now do the other one. So that's my 2 gusset pieces finished, and I can set them to one side. Get your zipper tab, fold it in half so that the short sides meet. Good savage pinch on that halfway line. Open it up, come back to the middle and the middle. Put your zipper in, fiddle about so that it looks like it's centered, and clip. Stitch along here and at the back of there. So I've stitched and I just need to trim and get one of my outer pieces. Fold it in half. Use that line on my, fold the zip in half, pinch, line them up. Just a quick word, you can see here that my thread has got into a bit of a bird's nest, as they say. The reason for that is because I have a thread cutter, an automatic thread cutter on my machine, and I used it. And that means that I got a bird's nest on the stitching when I did it again, because I didn't have a tail to pull out and hold for that first couple of stitches. Anyway, back to this. Now you can choose to stitch this on and then come back and get your lining and put your lining on, but I'm going to do it all in one go. I will iron this as well. So I'm going to just clip this on and stitch along here. So having stitched it on, open it out, press that seam I've just stitched. Because this is vinyl and a form of canvas on the back, I'm not actually pressing with an iron. I'm not feeling quite brave enough to melt things yet. So I'm just going to press along here and then that just helps keep it down. And I will go back now and top stitch. And there we have one side of the pouch is done. So now I'm going to repeat. Get the other side of the pouch. The zipper is right side up. Lay it down, matching the sides first and matching the top of the zipper. Then I'm going to turn it over, get my other lining piece, match the sides, and then I can sort of slide it up to the top. Yep, still good on the sides, and I will stitch again. So there's my pouch, top stitched, zipper inserted. So what we're going to do now, open the zip halfway, outer to outer, lining to lining, folding that gap so that it folds down into the lining. I always find it easier to start on the ends of the zipper because it just sort of holds everything square. Now again, on the bottom here, we're going to leave an opening, couple of centimeters, about, what, 3 inches, so about 7 centimeters, 5 if you've got small enough hands. I don't. And we're going to stitch round. So just to show you what I'm doing, so I'm just slowing down. I've got this on a reasonable thread for me. Now it chunked going through that. That's actually just purely because I've got that leatherette, which is quite thick. It's just gone through 4 layers of the leatherette plus the lining. Okay, so that's why it got chunky, but I haven't touched the zipper tab. Now coming this way, it can be a little bit more exciting. There, can you hear that again? It's just gone, it's just, oh, that's a bit heavier than it's been. So I've just slowed down, and we'll just go through it slowly, just so that I don't break a needle. So as we did before, I'm just going to trim the corners, avoiding the stitching. I'll just even that up. And turn it out. Yeah, I'm going to just get the old chopstick in there for a quick poke in those corners, because this is going to be standing on the bag, on the base of the pouch, so I don't really want it to be out of proportion with itself. So I'm just going to take this out and pop these corners so that I can get a nice seam at the bottom here. And then I'll stitch that opening I just turned through closed. Okay, so there's the bottom seam done. Just snipping those. Push that in. Make sure that that's all sitting nicely. I'm happy with that. Close that up. And we've got a nice little pouch ready for the middle of the bag. Find the middle. I'm just going to do that by folding in half, making sure that these wings and the top match. Give that a pinch. There's my line, just line it up to that one. Repeat on my and lay that on top. So I'm just checking that this is an inch or 2.5 centimeters down. Then I get my ruler and I measure again, and I mark, so 4.5 centimeters or 1 3/4 inches. I'm going to make a 7-inch zip. So I draw my rectangle, and then I divide it in half. And then 1 centimeter along, or 3/8 of an inch, we draw a pyramid. Now, I am going to pin. This is one of the few places I definitely, absolutely, categorically pin. Okay, let's just make sure that's still in the right place. I've done the same thing on the other end, that's why the middle suddenly looks completely pink. What we're going to do is stitch round this rectangle on both ends. So I've stitched around each box, you can see here with the pink thread. We have to cut this open. So I use a rotary cutter and I go down the middle. I don't go all the way to the end, I'm not brave enough for that. And then I go in up to that pyramid, and then we go into the corner and again. Alright, then I'm going to pull this through, so that's taking the bottom through. And I'm just going to try and push that down to stop everything puffing and getting in the way. Now this top is a little short, so just do this slowly because you want that same fold. Now after you've done this, you can press with an iron to keep this shape. Just do what's best for your fabric. Because of the fabrics I'm using, I'm not going to press. And there's the opening. Okay, now my zips are very long, so I'm going to lay my zip down. If you have tape, if you have double-sided tape, put it on here and then stick your zipper onto it. Some people substantially prefer doing it that way. I don't. I was taught this way, so I still do it this way. Now I don't put a lot of pins in. What I want to do is when I'm happy that that zip coil is in the middle, I pin it to keep that there. Now my zipper tape is a bit longer than my opening, so I've made sure that the metal stops on my zip are clear of where I'm going to sew. And I'm going to put a different pin. There we go. I'm going to put this pin through to catch that. And then I'm going to stitch around the window again. So I've made both of my pockets now, stitched around that window that I made, folded the fabric up at the back and stitched around it. Fold over 1/2 centimetre at the most, because it's going to get quite thick. 1/2 centimetre is about 1/8 of an inch. And you just want to stitch that in place. So having done a 1/2 centimetre seam allowance, literally a 1/2 centimetre, I can fold the short edge in half, matching the edges of that long edge. As much of a pinch down the middle as I can so I get a visible fold line. I come up to the middle. I sometimes put a couple of clips on here just because it helps stop everything. Bring that top down to the middle and then fold over. And fold over. Just make sure the ends are even. And now what I'm going to do is again a 1/2 centimetre seam down either side. So I've stitched a seam down either side of the strap. Just a tip to stop it from twisting, always start on the same end when you're sewing your handle. Having made the handle, I need to fold it now. This first fold needs to be about 1 inch, is fold it over like that. Okay, so that's 1 inch on the bottom. This will be shorter, about 3/4 of an inch. Now I need to clip it, and this is where these big clips come into their own. One there, don't let go, and one there. What that does is that keeps it together. So I'm going to repeat on this side about 1 inch using my thumb, and I fold it over. I will just double check that. Yeah. Okay. Just making sure that it's staying square. The reason I'm doing this with the vinyl is it just keeps that shape that we want when we put the handle on. So there's the Z shape I talk about in the pattern. What I need to do is find the halfway, fold that by matching this and down here. Just give it a bit of a savage pinch and I'll line it up with that one. Okay. I'm going to use my scissors to stop it folding off. I'm going to take my handle and I'm going to fold the top in half, and I'm going to match those two pieces. Bit of a pinch. It's not going to be perfect, but that gives me halfway to halfway. So So the handle needs to be lying 2 inches down. I can see that it's not. Move that up a bit. Now if you're using fabric for the handle, you should be able to pin that first 1 inch fold on. Because I've got vinyl, I'm using an air erasable pen. And what I do is I lift it up a little bit, and I just mark that bottom corner so that I can see when I put the handle down on the sewing machine, I'm going to match this end of the fold onto that. Yeah? And there's the second one, boxed with a square and an X in the middle. You can see the stitching on the back. What I do when I get back to the cutting table, I'm just going to tidy up the threads. I try to put the clips back just to, one, keep that handle out of the way, but also it helps keep that shape, helps the fabric learn that shape. So now what we're going to do is attach the 2 gusset pieces to one side of the lining. First thing you need to do is make sure you've got a ruler. So what we need to do is that stitching line is our guide, and we're going to mark 3 millimeters. So using that as my rule, I'm going to draw a 1 centimeter line. And then 7 centimeters straight down on either side. Do here. You will feel that your pocket is underneath. You can lift it out of the way so that you do not stitch your gussets onto it, or you can leave them there, and when you stitch your gusset on, it will be an extra point of holding that pocket down. So I'm going to, on this side, leave the pocket down. I get my gusset and I lay my gusset over, lining up the edge of the gusset with that furthest line, and then I just pin it in. So my gusset is laying out at 90 degrees. I get the other side. There's the line, oh, and there's some thread that didn't get cut off before. So I take the edge of my gusset to the edge of that line. And I pin it on. Okay, I have adjusted my stitch length because I lengthened it for the handle. So it's come back down. I'm going to do exactly the same thing as I did on the handle, the boxed X. Now remember, this is the way I do it. Different people do it different ways. I don't think there's a right way or a wrong way. I think there's a way that works for you and your machine. I do it differently depending on the material I'm using though. Now remember, this is a little bit thick because I am stitching on top of my pocket. It's not necessarily a thickness to write home about, but it is a little bit thicker than it would be. So now I've got to come down here. So what I do is I actually try and line up that needle with this. And then we'll go across to the other side, which acts as a little bit of extra reinforcement because this will get a lot of wear anyway. So you can see I've put my boxed X, and if I turn it over you can see it's caught the pocket. Okay, if you haven't put your zip pull on, reminder to put your zip pull on. I'm just going to go and stitch a couple of stitches across the ends of my zipper tape. So having done that, what we're going to do now is just find the halfway point on the zip. Teeny tiny snip, really nothing massive at all. Yeah, nothing massive at all. Find my halfway point here by matching the sides at the top and the wings, as I call it. Let's just plonk that there. And I match the middle. I'm using a leatherette, I'm not going to pin. Now what you can do here, just a couple of teeny tiny snips, literally what that does is it will help you fit the zip around the corner. I'll demonstrate what happens on the other side if I didn't do that. Now you should have a tail. You should have an amount of zip hanging off on both sides of your outer. That's fine. Don't trim them. Don't worry about it. Just make sure you've got it. If you don't, it possibly means your zip isn't centered properly. What I'd like you to do first is just mark about 1 centimetre, about 3/8 of an inch, maybe a little bit more if you wanted to, but not much, before the end. Make sure whatever you marked on one side is the same as you've marked on the other side. It's really important that you have those marks, and it's really important that you stop and start in the same place on your zipper, because we need that gap as part of the construction later on. So I'm just looking for the mark that I put on the zipper tape, because that's where I need to start sewing from. Get my foot on there. I did it on both sides of the tape, so I can actually check I'm lined up with the other side. Yeah, so I've put the needle in the same place as the mark on the other side. Back stitching. If you're wondering, yes, I have snipped the zipper tape here on this corner. So now that needle is lined up with the point of that corner, I can lift my foot and turn, and that will help keep that sharp shape when we get to the end of the bag construction. Now I'm just putting my finger onto the tape here to keep it straight and in the corner. Yeah, I'm roughly lined up there, so I can lift and turn. I'm sure there would be space, but just to be sure, I'm moving the zip pull. Now I'm not flying towards the end because I'm looking for that stop mark. I can see it on this side. Yeah. And I back stitch. Okay, so the zipper is stitched on. What I need to do now is get my outer. And it's the side where I stitched the gusset on already. Fold those gussets down so that they do not get in the way. Pin them if you wanted to. Now we're going to match the ends there, clip it on, and stitch it in place. Now remember, you want to start and stop in the same position as you did for the zip. See, I've just marked it on either end just to help me with the starting and the stopping. Stitched on, starting and stopping at the blue marks. Let me just trim that, I thought I had. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it out, right side out, what we want to do is actually get this to sit almost as though this was the last step you were doing, because we're going to top stitch. So there's lots of fiddling and making sure that it's sitting flat and that that zipper is doing what you want. Now, one thing you can do is open your zip the whole way up and just come along with some clips just to keep everything held where you want it until you are ready to start working with it. It's not a guarantee that everything does what you want it to. There is no such thing, but we get pretty close. So I've checked that my gussets are down and out of the way. And I just check where I start and stop stitching. Oopsie. Just taking it nice and steady. Again, get to the corner and turn rather than make it round. It does actually affect how the bag sits at the end. I'm just going to come forward a couple more. Yeah, that's better. Okay. No, I think one more. Yeah. Alright, so now you can see my gusset's in the way, so I'm just going to move that down. Make sure the other side of my zip stays out of the way. All I'm doing with the zip here is just pulling it so that it is flat and away from the edge so I don't get bunching. Okay, so what we're going to do now, having done the top stitch, is we have to stitch the gusset to the other side. Now, to stitch this, I'm going to just keep that pocket up and out of the way, and I'll do the box. So that's the gusset stitched on, and I've dropped the pockets down. I got pretty close to the pockets when I was stitching, but I haven't actually stitched the pocket. Sorry. So now what we're going to do is just find that halfway again, because it makes life a little bit easier. There we go, match that to there, and then I think that's halfway. I'll check when I turn it over. You can see that my my outer is separate from my lining, so now I can turn it over and I've got my lining right side to right side. Okay, let's clip this on. Okay, you can see here the gussets are sticking out, so let's just try and resolve that issue now before trying to fix it on the sewing machine. Now again, where's my snips? There we go. Just get you can see how small those snips are, yeah? It's just so that it sits a little bit better going around the corner. Laying the zip on this side is a little trickier than it was because you've got more fabric fighting you to spread out and do its thing. Okay. Teeny tiny snips, teeny. The toddlers of snips, not even kindergarten, toddlers. There we go. Okay, so the first two are sort of sitting there as it starts to come into that shape. And then the second two help it to go around the corner. I do find it easier to argue with the outer and the zip before I argue with the lining and the zip. Now, as you remember, we need to start and finish our sewing before the ends. Okay, so now I have my two parts. I need to turn it right side out. I find opening the zip, just be careful so you don't catch anything if you do this. Pull it out through one of the side pieces and fold. So you're starting to get an idea of what it's going to look like. Let's open that zip completely. Now you can see I've top stitched this side but not this side, so you can see the difference in how it's sitting. So that's the benefit of the top stitching. So I'm just going to go around now, again with the quilting clips because they're big and they don't leave marks when I use them. And I can feel that fold, so remember that your top stitching is no more than 1/4 of an inch, about 1/2 centimetre when we do it. So we need to catch that seam just to make sure. Okay, so I started and stopped before the end. I lengthened my stitch because I was top stitching. I back stitched, and that is now almost done. So what we're going to do in the construction phase is we're going to fix these wings to these side seams. Okay, first thing we need to do is turn this back the way we had it. I'm going to take these off with the outer on one side and the lining on the other. So just be careful, because it's only these that are holding things together, for want of a generic term. Then find your halfway point. Match the wings up. Let's just get the zip out of the way. That's halfway. Yeah? Do the same on the other side. Get the gusset out the way. Get the zip out the way. Just make sure, yeah, that's even. Pinch it. Okay. So what I've got is I've got my 2 marks at the halfway point on the outer, and I have the same on the lining. What we're going to do now is take this halfway point, take this halfway point to the middle of the zipper coil, like that. Match the edge . Keeping that zipper coil flat, and you can see those tabs from when I stitched the zipper on are sitting there quite nicely. Now, one thing it's really important to do is when I turn this over, I just want to make sure that the tabs from the lining are not caught. So I'm just going to need to move that one back, flatten that out, make it nice and straight. Now you can see my zipper and the pull are on this side of my seam, and I've got to keep these little tabs out the way whilst keeping the zip flat. Just one thing to say before I start, you may see some needle holes in my fabric and in my outer. My bobbin ran out halfway through, so I've had to unpick things and start again. So what I'm going to do is just with a 1 centimeter seam and keeping everything nice and flat, lining up and out of the way. I didn't put my needle down after I turned the machine on. Okay. Now you will have noticed that, sorry. So you will have noticed that I didn't stay true to the 1 centimeter here. that's okay. So stitching the lining. Sorry, I removed the clip, so I just got to fuss. So we're going to lift the outer's tabs away. And go over here. I apologise if you can hear banging in the background. We've got a severe weather warning and my husband is on the roof of the house at the moment. No, I've no idea why. Okay, I'll show you what that looks like on the table. So just to show you what I've stitched, I've turned the bag the right side out. Just pop those corners. So you can see there is the tabs are in, which has closed that edge. I close the zipper. I'm starting to get the shape of the pouch. The other end is still quite open, but this side is showing what we want. Now what I need to do is repeat this, but only for the outer on this side. So I'll turn the bag back out and show you what I'm doing. Okay, just as a tip, when you're turning the pouch inside out, don't push out that area where the zip is. It makes it a lot more difficult to get this working space here. You can see inside the pouch, hopefully, if the light is good enough. You can see it's actually still there. I haven't pushed it through. And I've got a good amount of space and the wings are moving quite well as well. So what I'm going to do now is just repeat. There's my center line. I need to move that to there. Now, this side gets a little bit exciting because there's a bit more movement. So quilting clips can be a really good investment because they help stop things moving too much. The other good investment is to just bring the swear jar a little bit closer to where you're working, and you can drop that 50 cents a word in. Okay, it all adds to the wine fund, doesn't it? Right, let's clip there and there. What I've got to do is I've still got to make sure that these lining tabs are out of the way. And when I'm working on this on the sewing machine, I've actually got to help this zipper to stay together. Don't do the zip up because you won't be able to get in properly. But if I can do that when I'm folding it, when I'm stitching it, it will help. Okay? Sorry, and one other thing, you need to have that bit of tail hanging out. Don't trim it. Do not trim the end of the zip at any stage in this pattern. Okay? That's going to overhang, and when we catch it with the seams, it will help secure it and fix the main zip at the end points. So the tabs are out of the way and I've stitched through. Okay, so I've stitched. What I'm going to do now is turn this out. Don't cut the zipper. I'm just going to close the zip, make sure that it's all doing what I want it to. That looks right, doesn't it? I'm happy with that. What we're going to do now is close this seam. So we pull this up and fold it over 1 centimetre if you can, and we fold it over. Just grab some pins. Okay. Now work as you need to from the centre to the side, or from the sides through the centre, whatever works for you. But you do need to go along, secure it. And then we're going to stitch it. Home stretch. What we need to do now is get the side gusset. I'm just matching up those edges in there. Pinch on that fold. Get my pocket. Get that seam and match that seam to the fold. Now I'm going to stitch this on. You only need to sew the gusset. Don't start down here. You just the gusset coming up. So that's one side of the pouch stitched on. Because of the gap here with the zipper tabs, you should be able to get your foot in quite far, but always start at the bottom and come up. So now I'm going to repeat the process on the other side. Match that up, fold it and make a solid line. Find that seam. Now I'm just going to check as well that these are sitting, yeah, at the same place on the pouch. Because as I said to the beginning of the video, that pouch has got to sit in the middle of the bag. So we want to make sure it's sitting nice and level and even. Yep, I'm happy. I'm going to sew. And that's the second side stitched on. Oh, and a second time I've forgotten about those threads. Okay, and there is the pouch. I'll close the zip. one Frogmouth Zippered Pouch with a full zip opening, 2 internal zippered pockets, and a pouch in the middle. Thanks so much for joining me today sewing the Frogmouth pouch. I hope you had fun. I hope you love your pouch. I would love to see photos. Please tag me on social media, #2 handmade for me, or tag Frogmouth pouch. I'd love to see what you've done. Until next time, bye.